Also leading in change. This is like something we're kind of kicking around, which is how do you almost lead and facilitate change when you're going through it yourself in a very profound way. And that could also be wrapped around fear of your own job, as an example, or fear of the unknown, or fill in the blank. I just think there's a lot of questions out there. And so when you're personally struggling to consume, unpack, find your voice in it, I think it's hard sometimes to make that cutover of then how do I support my team when I haven't even crossed over that line. And then I think the last thing is back to capacity. I think we just do ask a lot of people right now at work. If we used a scale analogy, I think the scales are weighted heavy on expectations and deadlines and work, and we just don't give leaders or employees the capacity to, as much as they could benefit from, to learn new things and apply. And so I think that that's just part of an unintentional barrier that the managers, or a barrier that the manager wished they didn't have, but is probably impacting their ability to lead.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I hear you, like the capacity to play and explore and
Yes.
learn
Yeah.
and get creative, like, I mean, we're asking so much. I think something earlier that you said, which was really powerful, was that leaders still feel pressure to have all the answers. Why is that mindset so dangerous in today's environment? I'm Felicia Shakiba, and this is CPO Playbook, where we solve a business challenge in every episode. Most companies think they have a performance problem or an AI adoption problem or a transformation problem. But when you look closely, the real issue is almost always the same. Leaders weren't prepared for the amount of uncertainty they're now expected to navigate. So today we're going to talk about how to fix that by building leadership capabilities that actually move the business. Carlee, before we dive into all of that, I want to start with you. So, who are you before the titles, and what early experience shaped the way that you think about leadership and developing people?
Thanks for the question. For me, it's been all about sport. I grew up as an athlete in many chapters of my life, and it's both the team camaraderie that comes with that. It's the individual pursuit in your goals. It is also the struggles that come with also pushing and trying to learn from those. So for me, that's always been the case. So whether I was participating or even watching, right? I think as a fan, you learn a lot from the experiences. So that's a big part of my life and what has shaped when I think about culture, performance, connection.
Yeah. I was actually a big sports player too back in the day. So I feel like I understand
Love it.
the competitiveness. And
Yeah.
yeah. And now you're at Hyatt. Can you tell us a little bit about like what it is that you do in your role at Hyatt?
Yeah. So at Hyatt Hotels, I lead our global leadership development and org effectiveness group. For us, that's defined as I have basically talent end to end. So everything from talent acquisition, not the local recruiting, but the enabling features globally, as well as performance management. So we think about like reviews, career planning, etc. I also touch leadership development and colleague listening. And for us, that's engagement, that's onboarding, offboarding, right? Those different touch points that colleagues have along the way. And it's been I see you're shaking your head like so much like in love, and I agree. I think it's a good time. It's a lot of really impactful activities or impactful strategy that we're able to drive and reach for our colleagues.
Yeah, and how many like what is the head count at Hyatt? I just want to give context to our listeners about how much goes into like how many people are you actually impacting with all of your work?
Yeah, and I'll answer in two ways. So Hyatt total across the globe is about 220,000 employees. From where we impact, it's probably about half of that. So just a fun note on the business, we're about half franchise and half own and manage. So the colleagues that sit in our own and manage space is the group that we impact, but still about 125,000 employees.
Wow. Wow. That's a big number.
It is. It is.
You've really worked across industries, consulting, nonprofits, sports, now in hospitality. When did it first hit you that most businesses, like most of their challenges are really leadership capability challenges kind of in disguise?
Mm. I think it in part goes back to your original question of what formed and shaped kind of like who I am, because I think at the core when we're talking about moving work forward, it is about leadership. I mean, there's self leadership, team leadership, big executive leadership, so it shows up in all different shapes and sizes. So I think fundamentally, I understand that as we think about performance, but I'd say probably around honestly, pulling through out of the United States Olympic Committee, which is the second stop in my career, and heading into Apollo Education Group, which is my as you would assume third stop. And Apollo was a decent size, around 35,000 employees, also global, and was going through a huge amount of change. And when I say huge amount of change, that we were working against some regulation challenges that were happening in the education industry at that time. So we literally had a, I'll use the metaphorical finish line to hit in terms of what we were shifting, and that was moving essentially like a sales organization, so bringing students into university to retaining, so more of a counselor type profile. And so as you can imagine, sales to counseling, the shift that comes with that.
Yeah.
So HR, benefits, compensation, career pathing, how you hold people accountable, the whole thing was changing. And I just paint a little bit of a picture because you asked like where did I kind of get some of that consistency? And I think it was the root of sport of where what truly drives performance, which is what we're talking about. That's at the core some of these leadership principles, and then seeing that in more of a scale and speed and scale across different employee groups around the world to make that change happen. So that's kind of like really sealed it for me. And to your point is true, is very consistent.
Right, right. I mean, I think just a lot of different shifts in the leader is really like a shift in the business is kind of like a quote that I have always doubled down on.
Hmm.
And, all of those trickling effects or rippling effects in the business, really ripple from leadership for me and in my experience. But it sounds like it's fairly similar with you as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, everything from we could talk about culture. I always said if I ever taught a university class, I'd try to pull in some famous CEOs and do some case study work on them in terms of their work as a CEO when they started, the middle of the career, their end of their career, and what they did next. Because you can also dig in and start to look at like how did the culture shape from there. And so once there's culture, right? Like how does the leader reflect themselves and what they value? Because that's at the end of the day what you expect of people, and that translates and has like permutation into the company, but also on the strategy front, what are they passionate about, where are they headed, how do they listen to the market and where they're going. So absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. It's an alignment piece, right? From market to the business. And so one of the things that I really want to get into with you, which is around being in this world reshaped by AI, constant
Mhm.
change. What do you see as the biggest leadership gap that organizations are really struggling with right now?
I love this question. I've been trying to figure out how to say this. I'm going to test it with you, then you can tell me like how this lands. I think with AI we've been thinking about AI implementation as we almost sort of exist today. If you think about it as like a software or an app, right? Something that exists to solve a singular problem gets put in, and then that can maximize whether it's innovation or efficiency. We'll just use those two to be simple. And really with AI, what we're talking about is it's not a software or an app. It's not a singular thing. It's ecosystem its own. Almost, I took this from a class the other day, like a moldable a piece of clay that we were molding,
Hmm.
right? Because that clay can actually solve multiple problems
Right.
in different ways, and it can change over time, and it can by the way can break, but then we can build it back up. And so that shift fundamentally, I think, is a huge leadership challenge because if you don't understand that part of it, everything else follows. So, for example, I think that, right, when let's go back to like the app mode, you're training to a specific app and outcome. With AI, it's really more of a mindset. What are the problems that I'm trying to solve? And how do I use this moldable clay to help shape my outcomes in not only in a more efficient way, but a more effective and innovative way? I encourage people to start to think about this mindset approach because it starts to shift how leaders make decisions about what AI is actually going in their company. It changes how they think about then training and adding capacity for employees to actually consume. and move not only have the AI mindset, but then actually do the training to how to use different ways of thinking, right? How do I ask different prompting? How do I do research? How do I build different, I'll use the term GPTs or personas or bots and agents. And so I think fundamentally that's a big part of it. I think the other piece is really thinking about the investment. I'm touching on training and investment and capacity, but truly, what does that mean? This isn't make that shift, right? We need to create capacity for folks to have the thinking to make the hop over. And I think there's a lot of assumption right now of like, okay, well, if I give people the tool, they'll be able to like figure it out. And it's different enough. And so I think that's another one that's holding us back. And actually, I'll leave with one more because I'm very passionate about this, especially like large organizations that may not have full visibility on their total implementation. I think we're in this interesting stage where we might say, "Oh, we're doing AI. We've rolled out let's fill in something easy, ChatGPT. We'll have you. Does everyone actually have access to it?
Mm.
Does everyone have the opportunity to use it? Is their manager back to leadership? Is their manager supporting it?" And I think these are real barriers that are happening right now that get in the way of adoption because literally it's not in my hands, or there's other things happening in the system that sends signals to me that this isn't what we want to be doing right now.
We'll be right back. Back to the show. That's so interesting. Okay, so you talked about having the AI mindset. Is it
Yes.
available? Is the line manager supporting the team in order to actually have that follow through for people to use it? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. And let's just use a simple example. It sounds something like, did you use AI to build this project? Why did you do that? You should be able to do this on your own. To, hey, how can we use AI differently to like think about more ideas that go into our project? I used this yesterday when I was preparing for my presentation, and I want to share something with you that I learned yesterday. Like, let's dive into that. Now, I exaggerate a little bit on tone to make a
Sure.
point, but I think you could, tell the difference of what is, I think, like encouraging versus this isn't, I don't support this,
Why do you
right?
feel like managers might not support it? I mean, obviously, we all know that AI has productivity potential, right? Why do you feel like managers might try and encourage people not to use it? Or, maybe it's that frustration around you can, like you said, like you can do this on your own. Why would you, need to lean on technology? Like, why is that happening? Why do you think that's happening?
Yeah, no, I love the question. It's probably multidimensional. I bet some of it stems from fear. Maybe they don't know how to use it yet. They don't know what it is. I think, we've spent a lot of time. If folks have been in business for, I don't know, even 5+ years, we spend a lot of time of leaders and managers should have all the answers. So I think we've also built a system that's like, well, you should know. And so if you don't, I think there's an uncomfortability with that potentially. So that's in the like human behavior. Maybe I just don't know. I think in the I don't know or I don't understand, there could be a perception that AI is cheating, right? Like, well, yeah, sure, it could do it for you, but who's that gonna if you use AI to write your emails, are you ever gonna be able to write an email again? I don't know. I don't think maybe we need to do emails again ever. But all of that comes, I think, with knowledge and confidence. So I think that's part of it. I think the other part of it may be also leading in change. This is like something we're kind of kicking around, which is how do you almost lead and facilitate change when you're going through it yourself in a very profound way. And that could also be wrapped around fear of your own job, as an example, or fear of the unknown, or fill in the blank. I just think there's a lot of questions out there, and so when you're personally struggling to consume, unpack, find your voice in it, I think it's hard sometimes to make that cutover of then how do I support my team when I haven't even crossed over that line. And then I think the last thing is back to capacity. I think we just do ask a lot of people right now at work. If we used a scale analogy, I think the scales are weighted heavy on expectations and deadlines and work, and we just don't give leaders or employees the capacity to, as much as they could benefit from, to learn new things and apply. And so I think that that's just part of an unintentional barrier that the managers, or a barrier that the manager wished they didn't have, but is probably impacting their ability to lead.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I hear you, like the capacity to play and explore and
Yes,
learn and
yes.
get creative, like I mean, we're asking so much. I think something earlier that you said, which was really powerful, was that leaders still feel pressure to have all the answers. Why is that mindset so dangerous in today's environment?
'Cause I don't think we have the answers right now. I think the pace of change, well, multiple things. I think the pace of change we're moving right now is makes it very gray. Right, we're all figuring it out. That's I love these conversations because I learned something new in your questions and from you, and because that's where we're at, and we're living an example of that. So I think that's part of it. I think, and that's from, we'll just use that from an AI perspective. I also think the world is changing around us in a lot of like profound ways. And so that is putting like change and pressure that we haven't seen before. And so I think there's just a lot. I think there's just a lot going around. And it's not, earlier I mentioned, okay, we've built leaders to have all the answers over the years. And part of it maybe is driven by we had more, I don't know, navigation or ability to break things down or to consume and then act. But I think the other thing is just culturally, we've just been shifting expectations of what it means to have like authentic conversations, to be open. And so I think that's more partly maybe generational, partly like in the world. So I think these are other factors that are coming in. But I think the why do we struggle with this? Because outside of, we've taught people how to do it. I think as humans, we are still creatures of habit. We like to have some certainty somewhere, whether it's my schedule, whether it's, I mean, jobs is a big part of our consistency in our lives. So when that feels disruptive, I think it can feel unnerving. So I do think there's also just like this human behavior component to it of having some structure or some certainty somewhere.
Yeah. And as you've been talking, something just clicked for me, which was I feel like a lot of people feel like AI transformation is around getting from like use of pre AI to now use of AI. And I think that is the wrong story. What you are
Yes.
sharing is about going from pre AI to your destination is continuously learning about AI and how to implement that and explore till you get and it's like that ongoing like I think the end state is a continuous state of learning,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Like, did I get it right?
Well, for sure, and you said something earlier that I wanna pull on just to, like, maybe give another angle, but a consistent one, which is you said play
Yeah,
earlier, we don't give people the space to play, and I think that is exactly it. Like, that is what AI is. We're not sitting there with a manual and they're like, "Click this thing once." I mean, you can. By the way, you can ask AI to how to do that
right.
step by step. But literally it is a sandbox. It is literally, that's why I said, like, clay, sandbox, dump the toys out on the ground. It's not one toy box, it's 15 that are on the floor, and you're just building your own imaginator like, imaginary play place. Like, we are back to play. And, by the way, I think this is the other thing, tough thing for adults. Like, we've grown into, we've like, play's over. We already did play. Now we know the things, but no, we gotta get back to play. And I think it will be for a while in that state, just because it is so, we're evolving so much and it's so much in flux. I think new systems will arrive and ways to think will, or new systems and constructs will arrive at some point, but right now we're big play.
Yeah, yeah. And this concept that you have mentioned to me earlier, which was like learning out loud for
Mhm.
senior leaders, like what does that actually look like? How does that show up in practice?
Mhm. One, I think we're demonstrating it. You and I just did, you're like, "You said something earlier that I took away." I think that's truly learning out loud. I think part of learning out loud is having that one openness of maybe I don't know the answers, does someone else have it? So that might sound something like, I noticed something my team built, actually, I'm gonna use a real one. I have someone on my team built a dashboard in an afternoon, and I learned that because they wanted to give me perspective. Said, her name is Sarah. Sarah has a master's degree, and she's been, doing this work for, almost 10 years. And normally this probably would have taken her several months to maybe even a year to do this. And she did it in the afternoon. And all of our minds were blown out. Sarah still needs that experience because she needed to know what to put in there. Now, and this is where I come in because I was like, how, okay, first of all, yes, that's amazing. And can you show me what you did? Because how do I do that for other stuff that I'm doing? Like, I'm not building dashboards, but I sure am building other things. Sarah, can you show me what you did? So I think that's an example of learning out loud, like having that curiosity to explore. and be open of, again, I didn't need to know the dashboard, but I wanted to hear how Sarah thought about it. Like, what questions did she put in there? How did she construct it? Because there's something that I can take away. I think learning out loud is also the simplicity of, I read this thing, I'm going to pass it on to you. I think it's in team meetings or in work meetings where people are exploring innovations, and you just simply say, have we thought about, like, we could use AI for this? Like, would that add to our thinking here? So these are all just you asked kind of like, how does that look? And I think these are maybe simple ways that people can start. And I think once you start finding that rhythm for yourself of the curiosity, the unlock that comes from that is quite amazing. By the way, I think there's some freedom in that. I also think it helps building team connection, camaraderie, right? We're all in it together. And I know we're talking about AI, but I think this behavior is a leadership differentiator of, I mean, has been, but is certainly now and will be in the future. Back to your continual, we're in a continual learning cycle.
Okay, so curiosity is usually framed as a personality trait, but you treat it like a business competency, which I absolutely agree with, love, double down on. So, how does curiosity actually move metrics like revenue, guest experience, innovation? Like, what are you tracking? How does it move the needle? Where are you seeing that correlation?
Yeah, love that. I think by nature, curiosity starts us to bring us closer to the why. Like, why is this happening? Why did it happen? Which then gets us to the how, which is, how do we change it? How do we capitalize on this? And then the what. So as you're saying, revenue, guest results, etc. So I think curiosity can bring us. I'll use, just because you tapped into this, like guests in hospitality, we look at guest scores and we look at guest feedback, because at the end of the day, come stay at a hotel, we want you to have that good guest experience. And I think curiosity, right? I could look at a dashboard and say, okay, in this hotel, I've gotten, let's just use the easy terms, like negative feedback about over the past few months about their stays. Maybe it has something to do with housekeeping. I could just look at that and say, that's enough. Wait, let's go fix housekeeping. But curiosity sounds like, well, have we met with housekeeping and we talked to them about it? Do we know what's going on over there? And they might say, oh, they've been understaffed. Okay. I can also stop there. Oh, they've been understaffed. Let's staff more. Well, but why have they been understaffed?
Hmm.
Why are we having recruiting challenges, or why are we having retention challenges, right? Sort of like pulling back on the layer. So I think that's the first layer of curiosity to get to like the real
The
understanding.
root cause.
But where does that cut over to your point? I think that's also curiosity too. Like, well, why do I even care about the guest feedback? And why do I care that it's housekeeping? And why do I care about solving that? Well, we know through a lot of work that the guest scores is a reflection of their experience. And if people have a good experience, they return. They have higher penetration of their stay. Like, maybe I now eat at the restaurant. It's just not about the hotel, but it's about the restaurant. I might tell somebody about it. And this is where it starts to cover to your question around the revenue, right? The revenue, the return, the ongoing sale. And so that's where I think all those pieces come together. And since we're talking about AI, I'll just say, I think you can leverage, let's just use a simple one, which is a chat GPT. I work in this industry. This is my customer. I do these things. How can I measure that success and cut it to revenue? And I guarantee you, it'll give you some ideas. And then the next question is, how do I start? What's step one? So it's a great question, and one that is in our hands more than it ever has been before.
Yeah, yeah. I have some research on that. I think you might like. It would be interesting to get your opinion, but just to focus on what we're talking about now, which is around this AI transformation, leadership capabilities, and so forth. Like, you've built leadership capabilities at scale that
Mhm.
most most people will never touch. Over 100,000 employees globally. Where do you even begin diagnosing the real leadership capability gaps in an organization that large?
Yeah. For us, it started with data, so it's a good theme on our last question, which was, we did look at things like guest service scores, revenue. Let's just use those two things. And we use data around different various performance components. So think whether it's engagement, whether it's 360s, whether it's pulse surveys, whether it's completion of goals, right? The way I describe it is, we put all of that into an ability to kind of crunch that data and to say, here, with the business outcomes and with how we look at behaviors in the organization, we know that if if leaders demonstrate these 10 behaviors, they're more likely to have higher business
Yep.
results. And so with that, that was the process. I took a very complicated thing and simplified it in what was 5 steps. So just know that there's a lot that sits behind that. But to your point around how do you scale, it was about prioritization against data, things that we knew that mattered. And then we honed in on that. We said, these are the behaviors that matter most. And that's where we started then hanging our hat on, well, then what do we want to build behind that? So then you start to have things like leadership development programs. You have 360s that are customized to our organization and our need. When you do talent reviews, you talk about these behaviors. When you talk about performance, you say, well, what behaviors have they been demonstrating? So this is I'll call it the at scale answer, which is the identification of the behaviors and then how do we infuse that into things, into the systems or routines that managers, leaders, executives touch that continue to reinforce or provide visibility or prioritization on how someone's showing up and where they can continue to improve and have impact.
Yeah. I could not have said it any better myself. I think that people don't realize the amount of work and research that goes into ensuring understanding what the root cause is to then create then turning that into a value creation plan, right, for the
Yes.
business. And how, like, just curious, how long does that process take you from start to finish?
Hmm. I'll give 2 answers to this. I would say the initial output of how we thought about leadership probably was a year and a half long project. Now, we've been in a continual cycle of evolution because the world changes, the business changes, so that becomes more of a, let's sort of do light touch. But even those, the research or the time could still be several months. And then the long tail, as you can imagine, impacting 120,000 people, that could still take, 6 months, maybe even a year to consume, fly, and understand. So that's the way I would describe it. But now it's just the continual cycle. In that spirit of continual learning, we're always learning in the organization. We're providing new to our leaders and our colleagues, and they're learning. And the hope is that we continue to prioritize the most important things. But ultimately, the the development, the feedback, the focus in their roles is anchored against something that we believe matters most. And I think there's a lot of freedom and prioritization and clarity.
Yeah. We'll be right back. Back to the show. Can you share a specific moment when you uncovered a leadership gap, maybe during a transformation or a customer experience problem? How did that insight shape the solution that you built?
Yeah. And maybe I'll pick a simpler one, but still done at scale, just to kind of show range of like the complexity, but also I know sometimes folks, and I'm one of those people. I'll sit and listen to something and say, "That sounds really good. We would never do that here because maybe we don't have the, whatever fill in the blank reason." So I'll give a simple one, which or simpler model. When I was at Under Armour, we were going through a huge business transformation. I joined Under Armour after they had finished a high growth run, so almost peak of kind of where the brand was at. And the next step in the organization evolution was, I mean, it's kind of the question of who do we want to be when we grow up, but it was really at the end of the day about how you scale globally. There was global presence, but how you continue to scale. Who is the core consumer? Because in the growth, they started getting a different sense of multiple consumers, which means then your product starts to wane down into where, how you're penetrating. So it was a tightening of that. And the last part was literally the operating model. How do all the departments actually get that work done? And as a peek into a place like that, think about a shoe. Someone has to come up with the innovation. That's done 3 years plus before it hits the market. Innovation, then you have design and development that has to get built, and then someone has to buy it, and then you have to ship it. So it's a really long tail to deliver value. All of that was changing, and so we were leading this major business transformation initiative to make all that happen over a couple of years. And the question you're asking me is about like understanding those gaps to move performance forward. And so what we did here is we just worked with the executives that were tagged to leading the initiatives and the teams that they've had under them to drive their specific business outcome. And we ran regular pulse surveys. And we looked at confidence, literally confidence to drive the change.
Interesting.
Yep, confidence, their understanding of information that related to their business, And did they have the tools that they needed to lead the change? That's it, 3 questions, and we would run it regularly, and we'd report to the COO around that insight. And we would use a green, yellow, red system called Stoplight, super innovative,
I love
the
it.
name. And that was the conversation because what it was about was helping the leaders, be good change leaders. Do they have the information? Do they feel confident, and do they have the tools? An executive doesn't have information. How can they scale the change that they're being asked to do? So we used it as a diagnostic tool to help understand what was going on. Then we used it as a under the diagnostic, like where can we go help? And at the same time, we were also building change leadership capability because then it became a coaching conversation. Like, okay, why don't you have confidence? What tools do you need? All right, let's talk through that and work it through. So that would be an example of identifying capability gap and doing it, I'll call it more in an iterative way, but it is also an example of still at scale. Under Armour's not a small organization, but here's something that we just did very simply. We ran a stoplight on I think we were using like a Survey Monkey at the time,
Yeah.
and that it was huge.
Would you call that like the questions that you were asking? It sounds like, is it like a change readiness assessment, would you say, or something different?
I think we probably boiled it down to what you could in our practice call it a change readiness survey. I think we really looked at it as, yeah, change readiness through the lens of leadership.
Yes.
Because it was really about the leaders and their teams,
Mhm.
which were the spear, if you will, of everything else. Like, if we weren't doing it right there, there's no way that it was happening at the employee level.
Right, right. And training, training part is easy. Behavior change, that I think is where the challenge is. And what you've learned about making leadership capabilities actually stick, what what do you think allows it to stick like on the job for long term?
Mm. I think some of it sits in the initial setup that we provide for leaders to be successful. What I mean by that is, have we given them the tools and information and, to be successful? I think the other part of it is, and I'll call this one a wraparound of a strategy, which is what we said, what we're trying to do, right? Sometimes we roll out an initiative or a strategy and we say it's something, but really it becomes something else, and we never reconcile the two in the middle. And so I think that that's really important.
Yeah.
I think the other part of it is also the recognition of where you've come from, where you are today, and where you want to continue to go, and be realistic about those things, because there's nothing better that reinforces what you've done than the recognition of the distance you've literally come, and sets people up for success or sustainability by creating a clear next step. Sometimes we don't do those 3 phases of the work. We move from here to there, and then we stop.
Mhm.
Or we move from here to there, and then we're like, "Oh, great, now let's, like, skip level, I don't know, 10 years from now, like, let's do more." And there becomes a mismatch of reality and expectations, and that can take it out of people. So I think those are a few things to think about, and probably, and this is more from, like, a strategy and scale level, but I think is really important and to be applied in a lot of ways, which is how are you being intentional about the messages that you have, about what you're continuing to reinforce, and where you wanna head? Because all of that to me is about acknowledgement, right? It's affirming and it's clear, and I think with those things, you start to build a real sustainable model.
Yeah. I would agree with you. I think you really have to understand where you are in order to even, look at like where you want to be and how to get there. You have to truly understand like what does that line from here to there look like?
Yeah. And the next one, I think that one's important, right? Like, we'll wrap a sports analogy in here. Maybe I'm running a lap, I'm trying to make a lap in 10 minutes. I know where I'm going. Well, once I reach there, well, what's next? Am I trying to make a lap in 9 minutes and 50 seconds? Because not only do I get to celebrate, but now I have, like, that next part of it. And there's naturally a sustainability built in there because I need to maintain something of what I did before in order to move up.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. I think people stop after getting to their destination a lot and don't
Yeah,
really naturally follow through with the, okay, what's the next lap going to look like you said. So it is a continuous process. Like growth is
yeah,
continuous. And if you stop growing, if you stop growing yourself as a leader or as your team, that doesn't mean by numbers or head count necessarily. It means by skill or mindset. Like we're talking about AI mindset, right?
Yeah.
Ability to play and change skills and understand the need of what the business is and be able to adapt to the business need. And
Yes.
that is the growth, right? That's the extra laps that need to continue. You need to keep running. So
100%. You said something so critical in there, which is the business needs, because the business needs are always going to evolve because the consumer is going to always
right.
evolve. So by natural cycle, even if we just literally put that in a circle, consumer, the business, well, if it stops at the organization, you don't get that third turn, which is back to the consumer, which keeps right the organization running. And I'll double down on what you said earlier, which is also just the continuous learning and service to ourselves both in our lives, but also at work, to have continued development to also serve ourselves. And I think that's about fulfillment and enrichment in both how we feel at work and how also work impacts us as a whole person.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one more question for you out of this
Yes.
already riveting conversation. If a CEO was listening today and they asked you leadership capabilities that truly drive business results, where would they begin? Where would you tell them the first step is?
Hmm. This is such a good question. I think the first step is looking and understanding where you're going as an organization. And I intentionally, we just ended on this, but I just have to reinforce that. And that is both in market, but also to tie it in what we've talked about today, in, I'll use the term, maybe skill and capability within your people. I think then, so that being first, having that clear definition and skill and capability, I think you could even literally start with AI mindset as a place to begin. I think the second part is, where do they think they're at in achieving that goal? Where do we think our leadership, I'll use the term superpower or capabilities or competencies, can drive that? In our conversation, we've given an example of a very scientific based approach, the one that like we'd use at Hyatt. I think there's a lot of other options for people to, we'll call like sort data and understand how you find out what your leadership capabilities are. But I think really defining what that looks like and doing that not just with your senior teams, but your employees starts to create then that clarity and refinement and intention around leadership. And then how do you systematize it and how do you recognize it? Those would maybe be some ways to think about it. But I think I'll go back, I'll end where we started, which is being super clear on where you're going and knowing where you need to invest with your strategy and your people and pulling through that conversation.
Yeah. Carlee,
And I will add this too,
go
because
ahead.
since we're talking to CEOs,
Yeah.
back in the continuous learning, I think whether it's in people's industries, I think also looking at people in HR or workforce and finding other thought leaders in the AI space, I think is so critical right now because you're starting to see how that whole through line I just gave you of like where should CEOs start. I also think it's then about that continual informing of how they might want to think about that back to prioritization. But the more we can be consuming in diverse ways, I think the better off a CEO or any leader for that matter is going to be. But super critical at that level to lead organizations in a very disruptive period, a very open period, and a very continual learning period.
It's 100% necessary. Absolutely. Carlee, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great. I appreciate it.
Visit us at cpoplaybook.com. Your support as a subscriber means the world to us, so thank you for tuning in. I'm Felicia Shakiba. Let's connect on LinkedIn.